With experience in print, television and radio. Geraldine is currently the radio presenter for Radio National Saturday Extra that starts on Saturdays at 7:30 a.m. Geraldine has with a focus on international politics and business, Geraldine Doogue talks to expert commentators about the things that matter to Australians. Geraldine has won many awards. 2 Penguin Awards for Excellence in Broadcasting from the Television Society of Australia, a United Nations Media Peace Prize, a Churchill Fellowship for Social and Cultural Reporting. In 2003, she was recognised with an Officer in the Order of Australia for services to the community and media. Please welcome Geraldine.
Well, thank you, Beverly, very much indeed. And look, it's lovely. I'm sorry I was a bit late. I'll tell you why I was late, and it's pertinent because I'm doing my last Saturday Extra on Saturday morning. I've decided to step back, and I was doing a promo with Frank Kelly, who was taking it on, so there should be and yes, look, I've been doing it, I think it's 17 or 18 years, and I made and I'm doing a new show with Hamish MacDonald called Global Roaming, which is going to go to air, so there's going to be a bit of a reorg, as it were. There's this week, which is, if those of you who listen to Radio National, who doesn't listen to Radio National, is going to be, News is going to give that up. It's quite unusual for News to give up real estate, but it is. So Fran's going to go to air after the 7 o'clock news and go till 8:30, and then Hamish and I will go on at 8:30 till 9. And then Norman is going to go, they're basically sort of repositioning that Corona cast call to a new show, which I can't properly explain to you because I don't entirely understand it. I haven't had a chance to talk to Norman, called What's That Rash? Which is very much more, more to do with interacting with the audience to sort of really make it, well, I think anyway, it's going to be part of an expanded health report, I'm told. Like, there's so much happening. This is really the thing. There is so much happening at the ABC at the moment, like this week, that it's hard to keep up. And I'm not entirely confident I am keeping up, but I'll try for your sake. So he's going to come on at 9 a.m. And in fact, what is now Blueprint for Living with Jonathan Green is moving back to 1 o'clock, and there's a few changes. But look, the global roaming is something I've wanted to do for a long time to make foreign affairs better covered in Australia, which is what I've tried to do on Saturday Extra with my once a month a foreign affairs segment, where we gather 3 people to make foreign affairs as much of a water cooler conversation as bushfires or something. Like, I just think Australia's become far too insular, and the ABC used to do this more, and the ABC has been going through a period where it's been, well, I think almost ambivalent about whether it was worth the money. The overseas networks are a lot of money to maintain. This is our sort of standard coverage. We've still got our standard radio coverage, but television, I think, has been more ambivalent about foreign affairs, and quite frankly, I think people like SBS have eaten our lunch at times. I really do. So I've been sort of had this dream to make foreign affairs sort of, because I do think radio still leads. I think radio is the sort of engine room of creativity in the ABC, and to get sort of, I feel that we are now making progress again there, and the fact that they're prepared to back Hamish and me to do this program, which will, it's got this tag digital first. We've got to make it as if for a podcast, but it'll go to air as well, which is exactly what Radio 4 is doing very successfully in the BBC. They had a policy. I mean, broadcasters everywhere are just in utter turbulence about the arrival of the digital world, how we satisfy it properly, how we satisfy a younger generation who seems to be much, much more attuned to a digital world. Doesn't mean they're not attuned to an institution, but they've got to be almost massaged into that institution, in our case called the ABC. So what the BBC did a lot more is actually make sure that if they did a lot of podcasts, they've done quite a lot more formal podcasts than, in a way, we've gone more to hearing lots of new voices. The BBC's had, say, Jeremy Bowen, their Middle East editor. They've packaged up a whole lot of his marvellous material over many years and taken him back and produced him well to a more authoritative podcast. And then they've played that free to air, if you see what I'm trying to say. I've got more of a podcast audience now for Saturday Extra, just over, than free to air. And in fact, quite a lot of the ABC radio shows now, I think it was this year, it tipped over that 50% balance. And the view is that this is just going to hurry on now, really hurry on. So we have got this brief to do this new thing called global roaming, where we'll pick a big topic a week and wrestle with it with a bit of fun, probably less formal. Some of you won't like it, I know. And you say, what is she doing? But we'll always have a specialist on, and the idea is that we draw in a routinely younger audience as well as older audience. And I have been stunned, and I mean stunned, by the excitement inside Radio National among our younger producers at the announcement of this show called Global Roaming. Really very, very interesting to see. I'm still processing it. So, I was doing a promo this morning with Fran, who was in Adelaide. Unfortunately, there's a lot of health issues in her family, and that's why I was late. I was madly getting that done so they can start putting that promo out and so on. So, look, I'm not going to talk for long because I'd really love to hear your thoughts. It is quite a time to talk to you. I sort of thought, as I was driving out, do I want to terrify them? Or do I want to soothe them? It's a pretty character building time to be working in the ABC at the moment. There's so much change and insecurity. And you either, look, what distresses me about that is that I think it gets a bit Darwinian, only the toughest survive. And there's only so much you can do about that. At times of enormous change, it's a revolution, the digital revolution, tastes are changing dramatically. They really are. It's not for a while I wondered, I thought this is a lot of talk, but I really do accept this now, that we've got to be thrown off our certainties. And then you have to work out how much do you care to feel worried. And then you've got to make a decision about just yielding to that and going forward and saying, right, well, I'll have to go forward with my insecurities. And then you work with the teams around you and stop them trying to catastrophize. Catastrophizing never helps anybody. And there are people who, there's been distinct catastrophizing this year at the ABC, and you've got to say, look, we've got to invest in this institution, which is exactly what you do, for the longer term. Australia's changing dramatically. We've got to make sure the ABC is there in this changing Australia, weaving its bit of magic, even if it feels a little unsure of what magic it is that it's wielding. It'll get it back. It'll be more sure-footed. So we've just got to make sure it stays there, and there's a huge amount of effort going into precisely that. Do I know exactly what the digital first revolution is? No. Do I think my bosses know? No. I don't. That's the trick. That you'll say to people, they'll say, we're collapsing certain numbers of jobs, we're losing 3 and they're being adapted to digital first. You say, what will they do? We're not entirely sure, but they've got a new tag. So I just have stopped being panic-stricken about the fact that people can't put words to a lot of these things and say, okay, we've just got to get some structures right, and there is a lot of creativity there. and a lot of commitment, tremendous amounts actually. Just when you think it's not there, it shows up and somebody comes up and says, why don't we do this? Or I could do that. Oh, yes, you could, righto. And, you know, it's that classic story about agile organisations in the face of change, where you really do devolve the power, and it's slightly scarifying at times because you think they don't know anything. They've got no history. You know, it is extraordinary what the people coming in, they don't know a lot of things and so you end up briefing them. Now we're going to do a story about, you know, the 1973 war in Gaza. Have you heard about the 1973 war? No, okay. So you do a quick, précis, and you've got to rely on their smarts, their ability to self-start, to go, you know, I say there's one young woman there who's 23, still doing a degree, and I say, look, when I say something that is about history, and I can see the look on your face, you know, you're honest, go to Wikipedia, read up. And she said, it's because we're told not to go to Wikipedia from university. I said, well, ignore them. I understand what they're saying to her, don't be derivative, but for what I need, a quick précis, so that they can then go, you know, sometimes I hear them ringing up people. I say, you know, ring so-and-so, who's been a very good diplomat. And I hear some of the pre-interview questions, and I just think, oh, my God, you know, do they think this woman knows anything? Well, no, she doesn't know much. But she's willing to learn, and lo and behold, she does me a very good brief, and she has learned. But that's got to happen many, many times. So you either look at that and panic, or you think, right, we're working with that. This is the world we've got rather than the world we'd like. And, you know, it's quite invigorating once you give into that. In a way, it's quite invigorating, but it's certainly not comfortable. It's not relaxed and comfortable. No, it's not. And so we've just got to hope that there is enough educated talent who still wants to work for the ABC, still wants to set agendas, wants to come in and abide by the strictures of the ABC. That's a big thing playing out at the moment in terms of political attitudes, as you can imagine. People signing things that they shouldn't be, and never sort of confronting what I've had to confront all these years being a contractor. I will not do anything that brings the ABC into disrepute. Well, I've really tried to think about what that means. I'm not saying I've always got it dead right, but I'm cautious for that very reason. And to find that some young people don't seem to, and it is young people, because they haven't been introduced to this notion, that there are limits to what, if you take, you know, as I say, surgeons can't go into us, you know, having had a few gins and tonics before they go into operating rooms. Well, nor can you. If you're going to be a journalist, you're not at liberty to be overt and public about some of your thoughts. You're just not. Be an activist or go and work for Human Rights Watch, but don't think that you can do that and be a journalist. But that's playing out too. And, you know, managements, I can see, are pretty wary of getting into this because they know how it blows up and it takes so much energy out of their days. But you know, some ways they have to get involved. As you know, we have a new chair coming. It's got to be announced by March, and I gather it's to the last two. I don't know who they are. But I've been told by somebody who's very well connected that they had a friend who was told that they were down to the last three, and they weren't in the last two. So I am absolutely fascinated with that. I've heard rumours, but I know nothing. I know nothing. I think that new chair will probably have to be someone who's prepared to, this is my view only, who's prepared to be unpopular within and without. You know, I think it's been, it's an interesting new phase we're in with, again, a Labor government as opposed to a coalition government, that sense that we have to position ourselves for this digital revolution. You know, like we're much better placed than the commercial networks, to be candid, much better in a whole lot of ways. But it's pretty flimsy. Just exactly what it was, I would argue, with the Fairfax Papers, when they were still the Fairfax Papers. If you remember when they did that big transition under Greg Highwood, I wonder whether he's a name, by the way. I've often wondered whether he might be the new chair, because he has actually been through a big digital revolution. And do you remember that it was just, the Herald looked just like it had lost its way for a while. It's more sure-footed now, whatever you think about it, it is. And I feel that, so that's, I hang on, I look for models of change and whether they do it here and overseas. And you know, the BBC has just gutted Newsnight, which was their version of our Late Line. And they've absolutely gutted it because they say they've got to redeploy jobs for the digital first, and they say they want it to be a very much lesser, well, they don't say lesser, but discussion program, much, much more confined and contained. And it's huge grief over there about that. But they're having to save an enormous amount of money because of the whole licence fee discussion and so on. So, look, I think the new chair, I hope the new chair really sort of, in a way, is somebody who is used to power, used to public controversy, used to public conversation, and is able to basically respond and to rebut people internally and say, yeah, I know you're not going to like this, but that's what's going to happen. And really speak in terms of the stability and resilience of the institution. I'm a great believer at the moment, you know, as we're entering this 2024 with democracy. There are 40 elections on next year, big elections around the world, India, the US, UK, Brazil. Democracy is going to be tested, and democracy is up against it at the moment. And you know, people like the American political scientist Timothy Snyder believes that the way you defend your democracy is to protect institutions. Now, you're doing that by your commitment to this, our institution, you know, warts and all. And he said, you know, there's amidst great call for great leaders. Where are the leaders? Where are they? Well, yes, leaders have mattered hugely, but by God, so do institutions. Be they the Department of Finance, you know, ARENA, the ACCC, the ABC, whatever. It's institutions that actually are the hallmark of really democracies that can sort of roll with the punches a bit. Now, I think that whoever comes in, I hope Michelle Rowland and the Prime Minister, she's the, you know, Communications Minister, I hope that's how they're thinking. I'll bet they are, that they've got to have somebody in there who's prepared to stick their head up above the parapet, actually, and not be afraid of the constant carping and critiquing that is underway. Just let it roll off them. It has been pretty relentless, you know, really relentless from News Limited. And I think it has really robbed people of, I think it's made a lot of people demoralised. And look, the other thing I would say is, I'm sure you've had conversation about this. One of the things that is really challenging for news at the moment, so news is not a confident place at the moment. You know, the news division, which has been the shop window front, and I would argue, and have been arguing for a while, I mean, having come through news, you know, I was a journalist on the West Australian and then came through the sort of the news and current affairs area of the ABC, I feel the ABC is a much broader organisation than just news. It really annoys me when we get totally caught up with some drama around Canberra, when in fact, you know, a lot of other things we're doing in terms of sort of reaching out to a broader range of the population culturally are not given the attention they deserve. And I want to really say to ABC people like yourselves, really think of that. I think it's a very important calling card. The ABC is the most important cultural institution. It is much more than just news. But what is happening in the news area at the moment is news avoidance. There's a really major issue all around the world with consumers saying, and you might understand this very well, no, I'm just turning off, I can't cope. You know, they had the COVID, they had the pandemic, and then we've got Israel, Gaza now, and cost of living. And people have just said, no, I mean, a lot of young people. I mean, there are some views that it's as much as, it's hard to manage, to measure. 44% of a typical bulletin would just say, no, I'm turning off. And they'll go to music. Classic has been very much a beneficiary of this. But, the calling card of ABC News is to let people know when things have changed from the norm. As I say, we're not there to say it's a gorgeous day today, how wonderful, go out and have a coffee. We're there to remind you of the cyclones bearing down. But that has become a really tricky dance. What it means is that you have to script differently, you have to offer, I would argue that there's a lot of competence. Where are the changes happening that are competent as well as the incompetence? You have to prioritise that. Your promos are different, rather than, is this the tipping point for democracies? You can say democracy's on trial. Where will the biggest tests be? Where will the surprises be? Things like that. Just so that you say to the listener or the viewer, hey, I'm not here to terrify you. Now that is tricky. Like after September the 11th, how could you say that you weren't bringing terror into, to do your job properly? I can remember that vividly. It's one of the highlights of my life, having completely changed everything we were doing. We had a whole talkback planned on apprenticeships that day. And I got up in the morning and looked at the television, and I rang my executive producer and said, I don't think anyone's going to want to talk about apprentices here. So we just scuttled everything. But how we do this, I think, really will matter to whether we can confidently say that we're the most important cultural institution. Because others have watched this, and I'm not saying you'll go for all patsy sort of Pollyanna stuff, but people will work out. Like we've got tomorrow, we're recording for Saturday. Saturday is our last, we're doing a sort of review of the year. We've got a woman called Claire Kimball, who runs a thing called Squiz, which some of you may know. She used retrenchment payout to a great credit to set up a sort of online news aggregation site where to particularly talk to often women who didn't see themselves as necessarily included in the mainstream news coverage. She's done very well indeed, and I'm going to be fascinated because I look at her site. My daughter used to work for her, and I watch how she just tweaks the message a bit. Not so that it becomes inaccurate, but how do we do that? How do we do that in the midst of the Israel-Gaza war? I can tell you, that has certainly preoccupied us. So, that's where the audience is. We've got to serve that audience, not dumb it down, but be alert to the audience's exhaustion. And I think that that's a noble thing, as long as we don't see it as, that we're the bromide and we end up just saying everything's okay, when it's really not. And we've got to take people through who are the actors who are striving for solutions. Solutions journalism is the phrase. Sabra Lane, for instance, who does AM, she's really big on this. And she went overseas and did a scholarship that we gave her to look at solutions journalism. There's some very interesting examples around the place. You might like to call for it more and nominate it when you see it, because I think the more that newsrooms get to know, the audience, the considered audience too likes this, the more there'll be of it. So look, I'm going to leave it there and let you ask me questions and see whether I've covered what you think is interesting or you'd like a whole different discussion.
have a short time for questions. I would like the questions to be